Hello and welcome along to ESP number 5, yes, fifth in the series of ESP Soccer. Is that? That's the soccer ball. That's the football. Not much difference, is there? They're one and the same thing. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the transfer news, the latest transfer news, mostly going on in the Premier League. If you've got any other tips or moves that are going on, we don't just cover the Premier League, we can cover other leagues as well. But the quiz question today, I'm going to let you know the answer after I've run through the transfer news. The quiz question today is the following. Two players joined a London club following the 1978 World Cup. They were World Cup winners. Who were those two players? That's an easy question. The difficult bit is this. Two players were banned from playing for their country following the World Cup. A British country, no less. Well, I'm not going to ask you to name the country. I think you know which country I'm talking about. But who were the two players? It's not as easy as I thought, but they were blacklisted. That's according to Rothman's yearbook, which I'm using as my source, let's say. Anyway, talking about transfers now. Victor Moses, obviously, he's been in the news a lot. He's been linked with a number of clubs, but it looks like he's going to sign for Chelsea. That's the latest we're hearing. Dave Whelan, his chairman at Wigan, a very reasonable man, won't stand in his way. Looks like Victor Moses will be heading back to London for £8.5 million. Of course, he was a former Crystal Palace player. Another player heading for London is Santi Cazorla. In fact, he's already in London, and it appears he's already gone with Arsenal to Cologne. The deal's not done and dusted yet. It's not been announced officially, but just literally everyone is saying it's a done deal. £18 million, apparently the amount of money changing hands, which would make him a record transfer fee as far as Arsenal are concerned. Edin Dzeko, meanwhile, he's on the move apparently, or possibly. We're not really sure. £25 million is the asking price for Manchester City, but does seem as if he's unlikely to leave. That's what Roberto Mancini is saying, probably because they can't get £25 million. £22 million was offered, though, by AC Milan, apparently, and that was rejected. So it's not far short of the asking price. Why don't they just do a deal? Not too sure. But two clubs that have done a deal are West Ham United and Birmingham City. They've done a deal for Ravel Morrison, midfielder, joining Birmingham City on a year-long loan deal. Stoke City have also done a deal with not West Ham, but another team beginning with W. Wolverhampton Wanderers doing a deal, it appears, for Kightly. He's joined the 26-year-old signing, apparently, but we don't have any details about the transfer fee. So many clubs very loath to reveal those details, but he was on, he was coming near the end of his contract at Wolves, so it made sense to let him leave. So Kightly is now a Stoke City player, we understand. Joe Allen, meanwhile, may stay at Swansea, it seems. His boss, Michael Laudrup, is in talks with him. A £12.5 million transfer fee has been received, apparently, from Liverpool for the Swansea maestro. Swansea want to keep him. And, what about Tottenham? Luka Modric is training separately from the rest of the squad, apparently. And AVB, Andre Villas-Boas, says hopefully he will return to the team. Perhaps he's been a little bit too hopeful. Craig Bellamy, meanwhile, could be on the way back to Wales to join Cardiff City. He will be allowed, apparently, to leave on a free transfer. That's a very nice gesture from Liverpool. For personal reasons, I think he's unsettled in the northwest, wants to go back to his homeland. So quite why Queen's Park Rangers are in the running to sign him as well remains to be seen, but looks like they want to try to get Craig Bellamy, who seems to be on a rich vein of form, judging by his performances for Great Britain. He's one of the few players that came out of that competition smelling of roses. Emile Heskey, meanwhile, who to some people never smelt of roses, apart from for me, I always thought he was a very decent player. He's rejected a move to Blackpool, so clearly they agreed with me. So that's the transfer news. I'm now going to give you the quiz question. Sorry, it's a bit of a short one on this occasion, but I'll make up for it another time. Taking you back to July 1978, Argentina have won the World Cup. My first question was, who were the two players that signed for a top-flight club? Well, of course, the two players were Osvaldo Ardiles and Ricardo Villa, who had won the World Cup with Argentina. And reading from Rothman's, 10th of July, Sensational transfer news from Argentina. Tottenham signed World Cup star Osvaldo Ardiles and Ricardo Villa for an estimated combined transfer fee of £700,000. Sounds so cheap now. Ardiles costs £325,000 from Hurricane, and Villa slightly more from Racing Club. See, that was a bit of a shock at the time, I've got to say. Anyway, because of course Ardiles was a regular for the Argentina national side, whereas Villa was a reserve, more or less. Anyway, Keith Burtonshaw, the Spurs boss, said, "The Department of Employment told me, but there wouldn't be any problem. I never expected to get both players. It proves that Tottenham think big and want to be the best in the country." And this is the second part of the question. These two players were blacklisted. Who were those two players? They were blacklisted by Scotland, who got knocked out in the group stages, even though they managed to beat Holland. Anyway, Scotland blacklisted Don Masson and Lou Macari. In an ambiguous statement issued by the FA, they say the following: Don Masson, having admitted giving false information to our medical officer on a most important issue and having expressed publicly that he would prefer not to play for Scotland, could be accommodated in his desire. Well, on Lou Macari, they said the following: the team manager, in selecting players in the future, is recommended to bear in mind the vehement complaints against the association and its arrangements by the player Lou Macari. He should give serious consideration to the advisability of subjecting the player again to these arrangements, which he professes to find unsatisfactory. Sounds a bit Shakespearean to me, but it kind of meant that Macari and Masson would not be considered for national selection by Scotland anymore. Well, the reaction of English football to the arrival of Ardiles and Villa, quite interesting. English football welcomes the introduction, it says here, of foreign players into our domestic game. Peter Taylor, Tottenham's international winger, said this: the arrival of Ardiles and Villa is magical news. It's bound to affect attendances and create interest everywhere we go. And he was quite right. Of course, there were big influxes of fans to grounds just to see those two in action, particularly Ardiles. Tommy Docherty said this: Spurs have pulled off a marvellous coup. And Ron Greenwood said this: I congratulate Tottenham on their enterprise. Ardiles was one of the best players in the World Cup. The voice of dissent came from the PFA's Cliff Lloyd, who said, I don't think we would stand for a big influx of Argentinians to this country. What a spoil sport. Anyway, the reason why the Scotland question was a little bit tricky was because Willie Johnston was the guy that was found, was discovered to be taking drugs for Scotland in that particular World Cup. And this was interesting. On July the 12th, 1978, Willie Johnston, I didn't remember this, but Willie Johnston was allowed to play in West Bromwich Albion's UEFA Cup matches as the ban imposed upon him by FIFA did not apply. How weird was that? Well, I'll leave you on that weird note until the next time. Keep going to espsoccer.com, and espfootball.com will lead you to the same place. It's all one and the same thing: soccer, football. We love them both.